Hey guys, my name is Ryan Guest, and welcome back to the second video in Election Predictions Official's series of State House profiles. If you haven't seen the first video on Georgia, go ahead and click the link that'll pop up in the top right of your screen right now. I go into a little bit more detail there about how this series will run, so if you're interested, please do that before I get started. Okay, so hopefully now that you've either clicked that or want to continue with this video, today's video will be on the Commonwealth of Virginia, another state that will play a key role in the 2022 midterms. Just like in the last video, we'll first analyze the new congressional map, as well as compare it to the old one, and then point out any significant changes. Then we'll take a look at some of 538's metrics for the new map, such as median seat lean, the efficiency gap, as well as overall competitiveness. And finally, we'll get into the part that I'm sure most of you are interested in, my predictions. I will also be updating the countrywide map that you'll see at the very end of the video, as well as keep a running tally of each party's seats, so that hopefully by the end of this entire series, we'll have a full and comprehensive House prediction. But before we take a look at the new Virginia map, let's go over a few important details about the state's politics. Virginia is currently represented by 2 Democrats in the United States Senate, as well as 7 Democrats and 4 Republicans in the House of Representatives. The state's legislature, known as the Virginia General Assembly, is split between the parties as Democrats have a slight 3-seat advantage in the Senate and Republicans have a 4-seat advantage in the House. Keep in mind that before Republican Governor Glenn Youngkin's victory last November, the state had not voted for a Republican candidate in a statewide election since 2009. Cook Political Report gives Virginia a 2-point statewide Democratic lean in their partisan voting index, while 538 has it as D plus 4.6. Essentially, Virginia was trending more and more Democratic on a statewide and local level over the last decade, but the results of the 2021 elections, where Republicans swept all 3 statewide races and won back control of the state house, pushed back against that general trend. Okay, so now with that out of the way, it's time to take a look at the new map. For some background, after Virginia's new bipartisan Redistricting Commission failed to agree on a new map by the set deadline, Congressional redistricting became the responsibility of the Virginia Supreme Court. Therefore, unlike in Georgia, no party had control over the process, and Virginia's map was not drawn in an attempt to maximize the number of seats for one party. According to 538, the new map has the same partisan breakdown as the old one: 5 Democratic-leaning seats, 5 Republican-leaning seats, and 1 highly competitive seat. The only major difference on a statewide level is that the map appears to be more fair, with a lower efficiency gap and a median congressional district closer to the state as a whole. That is undoubtedly a good thing for democracy. However, the new map has produced new 2nd and 7th districts that would have voted for Joe Biden in the 2020 elections and Youngkin in 2021, making them marquee races to watch in the Commonwealth. As such, the biggest change on a district level between the new map and the old one is that Democratic Representative Abigail Spanberger's 7th district has shifted from a slightly Republican-leaning seat, stretching out from the Richmond suburbs, to a slightly Democratic-leaning seat in the exurbs of Washington, D.C. Although the 7th district no longer contains Spanberger's place of residence, she has announced that she will run for re-election here, and the new lines should make it slightly easier for her. That said, while Spanberger's district became slightly more blue, the 2nd district, currently represented by Democrat Elaine Luria, has gone from R+2 according to 538's partisan lean to R+6 in the new map. Therefore, the race in the 2nd district will be one of the most tightly contested across the country, if not the most competitive. All 3 major forecasts, the Cook Political Report, Sabato's Crystal Ball, and Inside Elections, rate this race as a pure toss-up. Meanwhile, Abigail Spanberger's 7th district is rated as lean Democratic by Cook and Sabato, and tilt Democratic by Inside Elections, respectively. And as I mentioned previously, this new map is fairer than the old one, a rare occurrence as we'll see throughout this series. The median seat average of the new map, so the difference between the partisan lean of the state's median district and the state as a whole, is R+2.2, compared to R+6.3 in the old map. As for the efficiency gap, a metric often used to determine whether partisan gerrymandering has occurred, the new map has a 1.7-point Democratic lean, less than half that of the old map. And finally, in terms of map competitiveness, 538 says only the 2nd district is highly competitive, but in a national environment that favors Republicans, which these midterms will almost certainly be, the 7th district should be considered highly competitive as well. With all of that information out of the way, let's get into the more exciting part of the video, my predictions. Virginia is among the first batch of poll closings at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, and you should expect that all but 3 of these districts will be closed as polls close, if not soon thereafter. Virginia's 1st congressional district is based in the western Chesapeake Bay and includes portions of suburban Richmond. Within the district are western Henrico and Chesterfield counties, as well as other localities such as Colonial Beach, Mechanicsville, and Williamsburg. The incumbent is Robert Whitman, who was re-elected with 58.2% of the vote in 2020. 538 gives the district a 14-point Republican lean, which is 3 points more Republican than in the previous map, so Whitman should win by an even wider margin than 2 years ago. Skipping over the 2nd district, I project that incumbent Democrat Bobby Scott, who was re-elected with 68.4% of the vote in 2020, will be re-elected to a 16th term in Congress. The 3rd district encompasses the inner Hampton roads, including parts of Hampton and Norfolk, as well as Newport News, and has a D+32 lean. The 4th district, containing the city of Richmond, has a near identical partisan lean at D+30, and the incumbent, Democrat Donald McEachin, who was re-elected with 61.6% of the vote in 2020, will also be re-elected, although this will be just his 4th term. Moving on, the 5th district is represented by Republican Bob Good, who was elected with 52.4% of the vote in 2020, after ousting then-Representative Denver Riggleman in the Republican convention. This district includes the majority of Southside Virginia and includes the cities of Charlottesville, Danville, and Lynchburg. Good campaigned on a far-right platform in 2020 and won by just 5%, despite the 5th district having a 13-point Republican lean. Nevertheless, I expect Good to win by an even more comfortable margin in November, thanks to a favorable Republican environment and given that the district has been drawn as slightly more Republican. The GOP will also hold the 6th congressional district, where incumbent Republican Ben Cline won 65% of the vote in 2020. The district is R+26 and is located in western Virginia, taking in the Shenandoah Valley, as well as the cities of Roanoke and Salem. Jumping ahead to Virginia's 8th congressional district, Democratic incumbent Don Beyer represents the most heavily partisan district in the state at D+50. He was re-elected with 75.8% of the vote in 2020, and the 8th district is based in northern Virginia and encompasses the inner Washington, D.C. suburbs, including Arlington, Alexandria, and Falls Church. Next up, Republican incumbent Morgan Griffith will be re-elected in the 9th district, which is comprised almost entirely of rural southwestern Virginia. Griffith was re-elected with 94% of the vote in 2020 without opposition from any other party, and despite his home in Salem no longer being in the district, he has stated his intention to run for re-election in this seat. I am going to skip over the 10th district, and I will share more on that later. But the final race that will be called as polls close or relatively soon thereafter is the 11th district, where Democratic incumbent Gary Connolly was re-elected with 78% of the vote in 2020. The district has a 33-point Democratic lean and encompasses portions of suburban Washington, D.C., including the city of Fairfax and portions of Fairfax County. Now, with all of these safe seats out of the way, let's move on to the more competitive races that will most likely be too close to call as polls close, starting with Virginia's 2nd congressional district. Incumbent Democrat Elaine Luria's re-election campaign is expected to be one of the most tightly contested nationwide. She unseated incumbent Republican Congressman Scott Taylor in 2018 by about 2% and defeated him again in a rematch in 2020 by about 6 percentage points. And while former President Donald Trump would have won the newly drawn district by about 5 points in 2016, President Biden would have won it by just 1 point in 2020, making it a distinctly purple district. Interestingly, according to her latest year-end campaign finance filing, Luria has brought in over $200,000 from corporate PACs since abandoning her pledge to not accept money from corporations at the end of 2020. Quoting a recent Washington Post article that I'll link in the description, "It isn't unusual for candidates for Congress and sitting members to accept corporate PAC donations, particularly for those in highly competitive races like Luria's. But it is unusual in Luria's case, given that she had previously sworn off those donations as a way to signal to her voters that she would not be influenced by corporate money during her 2018 campaign for Congress." Now, that being said, the PAC money only represents just a fraction of the $2.8 million she has raised thus far. On the other hand, state senator and U.S. Navy veteran Jen Kiggins leads the Republican field in fundraising, having raised a total of $660,000 as of February 22nd, according to OpenSecrets.org. This race in the 2nd District is going to be talked about a lot in September and October, and even if Republicans fall short of a sizable wave in the fall, this is the type of district and race that the GOP should be able to win. As for Virginia's 7th Congressional District, Democrat Abigail Spanberger is running for re-election despite the district being radically redrawn. The new district includes only 25% of her former constituents and no longer includes her home in Henrico County. That said, while Spanberger is no stranger to competitive races, the new map gives her a bit more breathing room. According to Inside Elections, her new district is 5 points more Democratic than her previous one, and 538 gives it a D+2 partisan lean compared to R+5 for the previous one. As I mentioned earlier, the 7th District is based in Northern Virginia and encompasses suburban, exurban, and rural areas of Washington, D.C. Spanberger was first elected in the blue wave of 2018 with just 50.3% of the vote, and was re-elected with just 50.8% of the vote in 2020. On the other side, there are currently 9 Republicans running for the party's nomination in this district, but just 2 candidates have emerged as top contenders: attorney and former U.S. Army veteran Derek Anderson and State Senator Bryce Reeves. Anderson currently holds a slight fundraising advantage, but Reeves is winning the endorsement battle with the support of Marco Rubio, Rick Perry, and Nick Freitas, who was the 2020 Republican nominee in this district. Considering the fact that Biden would have won the new district by 7 points in 2020, and Youngkin would have won it by 6 points in 2021, this is a lower-tier takeover opportunity for Republicans, but it is certainly within reach for the GOP under the current conditions. Finally, Virginia's 10th district is not one you're likely to hear much about, nor is it likely to flip by any means, but I can see the final results being a lot closer than people think. The district is based in Northern Virginia and includes part of the DC metro area, and has gone from D+12 in the old map to D+8 according to 538. The incumbent is Democrat Jennifer Wexton, who was re-elected with 56.5% of the vote in 2020. All major forecasts have rated it as safely Democratic, but I anticipate the final margin falling somewhere between 6 and 8 percentage points, compared to 13 points in 2020. Janine Lawson, the Prince William County supervisor, has received endorsements from several high-profile Republicans and is likely to receive the Republican nomination. Now, at this point in the video, I am going to do a little fun election night graphic presentation, but if you don't care for that whatsoever, please feel free to skip to the end of the video. With that said, I've got an EP projection coming in right now. We can now project that Democratic incumbent Jennifer Wexton has been re-elected to a 3rd term in the House of Representatives. A moderate, Wexton first came into office via the 2018 midterm elections, where she defeated incumbent Republican Barbara Comstock by 12.5 points. She is projected to defeat her Republican challenger Janine Lawson by a little over 30,000 votes and a margin of 7.4%. Republicans never really had a legitimate chance to flip this seat, but the margin being this close could be a positive sign for Republicans in other races. And on that note, Democratic incumbent Elaine Luria continues to trail her Republican opponent Jen Kiggins. The margin is now 5,500 votes, with over half of precincts reporting. This race remains too close to call, but if Republicans are to pick up a significant number of seats tonight, then Virginia's 2nd district will certainly be one of them. Then, in the 7th District, Republican State Senator Bryce Reeves leads Democratic incumbent Abigail Spanberger by an extremely slim margin, only 0.2%, and by a difference of just 785 votes, with almost 80% of the estimated vote in. If Reeves were to flip this seat, it would certainly be an indication of a larger red wave across the country, and thus a pushback against the Joe Biden administration and Democrats' control of Congress. EP official can now project that Republican Jen Higgins has unseated vulnerable Democratic incumbent Elaine Luria in Virginia's 2nd Congressional District. Higgins has flipped this seat in favor of the GOP, an outcome that was expected in a Republican-leaning national environment. Higgins defeats Luria by 6,508 votes and by a margin of 2.2 percentage points. We can also project that Republican Bryce Reeves has flipped Virginia's 7th Congressional District, defeating Democratic incumbent Abigail Spanberger. This is a huge win for the Republican Party and bodes well for their prospects in several other tightly contested races across the country. State Senator Reeves defeats Spanberger by a little over 3,000 votes in a margin of just 0.8%. Spanberger had to survive a contested Democratic primary, and despite running as the incumbent, she represented just 25% of the 7th District before redistricting shifted the district away from her main voter base. Now, let's take a look at my complete prediction for the Virginia congressional map and race classifications. Virginia Democrats had enjoyed a 7-4 seat advantage ever since the 2018 midterm elections, but in 2022, I predict that the Republicans will win 6 races in Virginia's 1st, 2nd, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 9th districts, compared to just 5 wins for the Democrats in the 3rd, 4th, 8th, 10th, and 11th districts. The Republican Party has received a net gain of 2 seats in Georgia, with key pickups in the 2nd and 7th districts, unseating incumbent Democrats Elaine Luria and Abigail Spanberger in favor of Republicans Jen Higgins and Bryce Reeves. Finally, let's take a look at the nationwide map. If you watched the first video on Georgia, you'll remember that Republicans won 9 seats and the Democrats won 5. So the GOP is now projected to hold 15 seats in the House of Representatives from Georgia and Virginia, while the Democrats hold 10. The Republicans have flipped Georgia's 6th congressional district as well as Virginia's 2nd and 7th to already give them a net gain of 3 seats. And remember that the number that they need to take control of the House of Representatives is 7. That is all for today's video, though. I hope you all enjoyed it. Please make sure to follow me on the social media shown on screen and linked in the description down below. Also, make sure to comment your thoughts and opinions in the comment section, and please hit that like button if you liked the video as well. Feel free to become a member of the channel to receive some awesome perks, and thank you all so much for watching. Check out more content from my channel here, and as always, tune in next time. EP out.